Welcome to this book talk session, Books as Pathways, Wandering, Wondering, and Wayfaring, led by Kathleen Tanis. Kathleen is a 512 curriculum supervisor for humanities with the Northfield Plains School District in New Jersey. She was an NCTE CEL Emerging Leaders Fellow and also a member of the NCTE CEL Executive Board, as well as the West Jersey Reading Council's Conference. And she was on a part of NCTE's Conference on English Leadership. In addition to that, Kathleen is a co-conspirator and a colleague at the Educator Collaborative, where she's a fellow. We also with Carrie, who gave a session earlier, have co-authored an article that should be out very soon through NCT's Voices in the Middle. I will also say you are here for a book workshop, but when you're around Kathleen, you get filled with hope and you get filled with direction. And even in our pre-talk before we went live here, Kathleen and I were talking about the quote from this morning from Dan Savage. And I just anytime I'm in your presence, I have the renewed hope for the world and students that I need, but I'm also given a direction to go in. So thank you for all that you do, all that you represent, and so happy to be here for your session.
Oh my God, thank you so much, Chris. That was so lovely. Thank you so much. And I appreciate Chris so much. I think being with him, I always feel like a sense of peace and just a calm in the middle of the storm. And we all know that our world is really stormy right now. So I'm so grateful for this community with Chris, but also the community that is here today with us. So this is my workshop is Books as Pathways, and just a little bit of introduction about what that means to me. So, you know, as an immigrant, right, like the whole idea of traveling, the whole idea of just wandering the world is something that is just really near and dear to my heart. I'm an avid traveler, but I also love hearing about like where other people are from. And when I started reading at a very young age, somebody told me that reading was the cheapest way to travel. And it continues to be true for me today. As I read books, I'm transported to other worlds, I'm transported to other experiences. And I think that's what I want books to do for a lot of my students. When they pick up a book, they get introduced to a new place, to new people, to themselves. So come on this journey with me with Books as Pathways. So all the books that we will be talking about today kind of take us on this journey. And I'm going to start with a quote from The Next Great Migration by Sonia Shah. And she talks about just migration patterns all over the world, past and present, but she specifically speaks of the world right now. Right now, we have more borders around the world, fortified with walls and other barriers than ever before. It hasn't repelled movement. It hasn't made people stay home. It's just made migration a lot more deadly. And that really resonated with me because I think of the ancient paths that people have walked. Our ancestral people from all over the world have walked for millennia, and what these borders have done. And I think of books as a way of like lowering those walls and really crossing those borders, getting into each other's world and allowing us to really understand just the vastness of movement that is around the world. So today we're going to explore movement in words. So for the first book that I have is Migrant, and it's not new. So none of the books that I have are new. Well, they're newish, but new. They're all on my shelf, right? So, Migrants is an amazing wordless picture book. And I love wordless picture books because I get to provide students with sort of a blank landscape so that they can put their thoughts and their words into the image and their interpretation based on their experience. So, having no words actually makes our students connect better to the book. It makes me connect better to the book because I get to put my own experience on it. And what I love about this book is if you look at the image, just the variations of facial expressions. So when I look at this book, I might ask students, what do you notice? What are they wearing? What about their posture? Like, pay attention to their body language. Look at the look in their eyes if you can see their eyes. Look at, what are they looking toward? Are they looking up? Are they looking down? Right? So I love this book because of that. The color. You can't talk about this book without talking about the color. So when you look at in my head, it's an ibis, right? So when I look at the ibis with the red legs and the red beak and the blue body, and I look at just the colors that are on the travelers, and I look at that little figure with a very colorful coat that is on the back of the ibis, I'm absolutely fascinated by this book. And every time I look at it, I see something different. So I'm going to scroll through some of the images, and then I'm going to show you the book and how I look at it, right? So if you look at this image, right, and then I'll read what the author says about like how they made the decisions that they made about the wardrobe and the colors and the variations. She says, I wanted to show the contrast between life and the sadness and difficulty of the journey. Color expresses hope. Darkness is more like silence. But more than anything, I wanted each character to have their own identity defined by each detail. The care I gave to the clothes, the choice of colors, and the characters' expressions. The first thing that happens with migrants is that they are turned into numbers and morph into faceless human mass, which we cannot identify with. So when I'm looking at the pictures, what I want the students to do is look at the facial expressions, look at what they're carrying. How does it feel? What does it say to you, right? Like, how does it speak to you? And I love the way the author uses color against darkness. So when you look at the book, like, it begins with just this blank, dark page that has nothing in it. And it's like you have to kind of make your own sort of ideas about what is it saying to me? What am I noticing? So you see the figure on there, and then you see this little piece of luggage that was left behind that they're looking at on the other page. It's an absolutely amazing book, and I recommend to anyone to just pick it up. And the colors are just absolutely gorgeous. We use this book as a paired text in my district with A Long Walk to Water. And what we do is we talk about this idea of this long walk and what are people looking for when they're on this walk? What are they walking away from, right? So I cannot recommend this enough. And what I like about it is at the end, I'm going to move to the next slide. Is at the end, you see the characters and you see the dark flowers, and then you see them moving towards flowers with color. And I think that's really important because it absolutely lives in the sense of like hope, right? The sense that they're moving towards something better. And I think in all of our hearts, we are hoping that we're moving towards something better, that we're moving towards color and blooming and hope. So I really like that. What the other thing that speaks to me about this book, and almost every book, right? I always look at the moment when you flip the page, that intersection, right? Like the spine or the center of the book, when you're moving from one thing to another. And that last page, they're moving from like the darkness and of the silence of the gray flowers into the color. And I look at it almost like they're crossing a border, right? Or they're crossing something. So I really like the idea of flipping a page and moving to something else. And I think when you're reading books, just the act of turning the page, the movement of it is like traveling. So I really love this book because of that. And I think our current reality is that we do have a lot of movement, right? Like the movement of human bodies across time and across space. And our hope for them is that they're moving towards something that blooms or something that is alive. So the next book on my list is Shakti. And I really, really love this book. It is a graphic novel, which in itself is just movement, right? Like I opened it to this page, and I'm not sure if you can see all of the movement on the page, just the flow of the light. And in this case, it's the flow of magic, right? Ancestral magic and cultural magic. And I really, really love that. But the whole thing about graphic novels is the way your gaze moves from image to image. There is always movement in the book. And I think that is powerful in and of itself. Just the tracking that your eye needs to do to go through the story. So in that left picture here that you see on the screen, it says this is the third time that they've moved in the last 5 years, right? So there's a lot of movement in the character's life, but also the author moved to the US from Sri Lanka when they were 7. And obviously learning English and reading stories, that is a journey in and of itself. And they talk about the stories that they wish they'd had at the time when they were coming into their own, and stories that reflected the colors, the cadence, misspelling, and the magic of their culture. And what I really like about the book is that she also has 2 moms. So we get to, get a peek into her life growing up. And we also, and one of her moms is Black and one of her moms is obviously Sri Lankan. So there's the movement between cultures and languages also happening. So I love this. And everything in the book is like movement, right? And this is really great. This goddess that only shows up when the world is in need of protection. And something about it really resonated with me, because I really want there to be a goddess that shows up when the world is in need of protection. And maybe we are the goddess that shows up when the world is in need of protection, right? But spotlighting the protection that she needed, right? But also in the Tamil culture, right? Like what the goddess does, and also bringing in the LGBTQIA identities, right? So just thinking about like just the traversing, like the constant traveling between identities, between culture, between past and present, I think is really powerful in this book. And I think the form dictates a lot of the traveling that happens in the story with the graphic novel, just moving from image to image. So I love it. And also I think about, this was the first book by a Sri Lankan author that I'd ever read, right? So thinking about how many other books are there out there, should I know more? How do I go about finding out more about this culture? And how many of my students wish they had more? So yes, I love this book a lot. So I highly recommend it. And one of my favorite books, one of my favorite authors is Isabel Wilkerson, but one of my favorite books is The Warmth of Other Suns, when she talks about the Great Migration from the South into Chicago and New York and everything else. And she says they travel deep into far-flung regions of their own country, and in some cases clear across the continent. Thus, the Great Migration had more in common with the vast movement of refugees from famine, war, and genocide in other parts of the world, where oppressed people, whether fleeing 21st century Darfur or 19th century Ireland, go great distances, journey across rivers and deserts and oceans, or as far as it takes to reach safety with the hope that life will be better wherever they land. And I always think about just, again, the movement of bodies across the United States and into the United States and out of the United States. And all of it is about the hope for a life that is better. So I always keep that in mind when I think about, books and reading and just migration and wandering in general. So if you haven't read The Warmth of Other Suns, read it. It's awesome. All right, so the next one is actually a rather old book, but I picked it up again because I was looking for a paired text for a class. And what I really love about this book is just the movement between languages that happens in here, between stereotypes and identities, between narrative and poetry, and from voice to voice. I am going to read a few of them with you. Okay. So one of my favorites, Naomi, I'm going to call her Naomi because she's like a friend. Naomi Shiham, right? Lexicon is amazing. And I'm just going to read a short part. So in Naomi Shiham, she goes, certain words get lost on their way. So already I'm like, okay, the words are traveling, right? Certain words get lost on their way. why should they pull us down their twisted paths, right? And I think about the spoken word and language and books in general and how they take us on these paths. And maybe that's why people consider books and stories to be so dangerous, because we get to go on these paths and they're afraid of us knowing, of us realizing how connected our paths are, right? So using them feeds them, right? And then she goes on to says, because my Arab father says, I love you, Habibi, right? And I love that the travel into a different language and then back into English, sweetness emanating from trees, mint in your tea. And then again, you are all welcome. The travel into language again, friends, strangers came right in. This sort of constant movement of people moving and words moving and languages moving within the poem. Really, I think she does this wonderful job of this. And then she goes, being a good example, why not? I was half baked, mix of East and West, balancing flavors. When they said, may we tell you about Jesus? My father said, he was my next door neighbor. And there's something just so awesome about that. This knowing, this knowledge, this claiming, right? But also the mix, the balance of East and West, I think is a really wonderful thing. So I mean, the poetry in here, the short stories are so great. I absolutely love it. And then the next one is Voila by Debbie Rago, and it's awesome. And she does the same thing with the travel between languages. When she says, when I was little, my great aunt, ma tante, used to feed me breakfast. That was when she had a straight back so long ago. I wasn't wearing glasses yet, if you can imagine. I must have been about 3. My parents were at work, my big sister at school. So it was just my tante and me, right? So again, with the language and the flux, and they're in the kitchen and they're having breakfast, right? So as she dipped my bread in coffee, I got distracted by tiny particles floating in the beam of light entering the window above the kitchen sink. My tante, ever vigilant of my feelings, asked what I was staring at. The peanut butter lathered bread I had been chewing stalled in the crook of my cheeks. I pointed to the snowfall of particles. It seemed like the most magical thing I've ever seen. Ma tante smiled. Magical, no? She asked, echoing my thoughts. And there's several things in this piece that I really love. One, the move between French and English, I think is absolutely amazing. I love the particles moving on the light coming into the kitchen. I love that the child thinks that they're magical and that the grandmother or aunt in this case read that thought in the child's mind that yes, it's magical. But I love that this peanut butter sandwich stalls, right? Like this movement that was happening stalls so she can stop and look at this magical movement that is across the air. So again, I love just the amount of movement and wandering that is happening in this in these stories that are in this book. So and it's great because it's like short stories mixed in with poetry, and it's just great. And it's old. I think it was published in maybe 2013. So I could be wrong. I'm guessing, but 2013. So it's not a brand new pick, but I read the stories and reading them again. I think just researching for a class, I thought was an amazing reintroduction to this book. So that's why I've added it, because it's absolutely great. Okay. So for my next read, I've got The Leopard Behind the Moon. And this one is absolutely new to me. I think it was published in 2023, but I hadn't read it. And then I ordered a bunch of books for my teachers, and it was in the middle of that. And there are several things that I love about this book, right? There is a sense of magic. Actually, in every single book that I pick, there's a sense of magic because I'm absolutely fascinated by it and the way we use magic to kind of make sense of our world and to keep our culture alive. So this book is also full of magic and folklore and legends, and I love that. And there's a very young character in the center of all of that. And what I think is interesting about this is the way they use the images in the 3 parts of the book. So on the screen, you'll see all these really wonderful hand-drawn images that are just really cultural, and you can see images hidden in the images, which I love that when I have to go looking and then I notice something new. So I think about how these images are meant to provoke the movement of the eye. Like you look around the border and then you're looking in the middle and you're looking over and under and through. And so I love the movement of these. And I also love that this book is in stages, it's in 3 parts. So every single part takes me to a new place. And I think that's wonderful. So I'm almost following the character and this village on its journey. And every time we get one of the pictures, it's almost like we're opening a door into the next part of the story. And every single page in each of the sections actually talks about going through a door. So I'm going to read this to you. I hope I don't go over on time. I think I'm doing okay. So I'm going to read it from the screen. I hope you can all see this, right? So every single book, it's in 3 parts. So part 1 is the one with the bird, and you can see the leopard on the tree, and you can see the child, right? And there's the shield and the tree. It's gorgeous. So then it says, long before you were born, or perhaps it was long after you had departed, there was a village. This village was called Sessa. This village called Sessa was buried deep in a tropical forest. The village was at the edge of a swamp where sweet thorn trees flourished and formed a hedge no one could pierce. Nestled in the hedge was a rotten door bruised with moss. And I thought, one, I love doorways. I love doorways and portals because it's like you open the door, you open the portal, and it's a new adventure. You get to enter a whole different world, right? So whenever I see a door in the book, I'm just like, oh my God, we're about to go on a trip, right? So I love that. But it was a rotten door. And it was bruised with moss. And you've always heard that term, like a turn of a phrase. And I thought bruised with moss was like the most amazing thing I had read in a long time. I just imagine what that looks like. Was it green? Was it blue? Like what kind of moss was it? Like, was it thick? Right. So I think about like what that means. So I loved that about it. And then for the second image, it says behind the village door was a swamp that stretched far and kept going, becoming wider and wider, twisting and turning and going this way and then that way, forgetting where it started and where it was meant to go. So again, we get the door in this very first page of part 2. And you have this winding road and this journey. And then for the third part, for the whole 2 days, the village of Sissa had turned upside down. There was no cooking or quarreling under the palaver hut, no meetings by the riverbank, and no lessons under the mango tree. Everyone hid in their huts, terrified of the evil thing about to seep through the village door. Chickens held their clucks, goats held their bleats, and the breeze held its blow. Even the kingfisher birds stayed in their burrows, abandoning their habit of carrying news far, all except Bisa. He was perched in a tree at the edge of the forest. And I think about going through this door, going on these journeys through these pages, and then suddenly in the third part, there is an evil that is causing a stillness, right? That stops the movement, the natural movement of the chickens, the natural movement of the goats, just everything. There's a stillness. And I think about this evil, right, that seems to be coming through. And I wonder, like, what is the next? Like, what launches movement again, right? The natural movement of people and things and wandering and wanderings, right? So there's something about this book that is absolutely magical. I think I'm running out of time. So I highly recommend it. Last book is Sugar Falls, and I'm going to do this one. This book is absolutely heartbreaking. It's written by an Indigenous author from Canada, Cree, I believe. Is his tribal affiliation, and it talks about like the residential school. So this is a very sort of heavy subject, but also one that I found that my students knew nothing about. So I really love this book. I love the amount of water in this book, which to me, water in my head equates movement. So at the very beginning, when the character loses their parent, you see them just wandering through the forest, right? So there's this sense of traveling from one location to another to safety. And then when she goes to her father to Sugar Falls, the father tells her that, the beat of the drum represents the strength in our relationships with our ancestors, with our traditions, with Mother Earth, and with each other, right? And this is right before the character is taken by the priest to the residential schools. And there's something about this book that just made me really recognize just the power of movement, the power of fleeing, of escaping, which several characters in this book do, and just of returning home. And then the character telling their stories to others so that the story continues to live on and it continues to travel through time and space and to different people. And as the story travels, the history travels, right? The story of a people also travel. So I really, really love this book. It is really, really sad. But again, with the graphic novel aspect of it, just constant movement and constant movement and constant imagery, the visual literacy that you need in order to just understand everything that is unsaid, which is also a very powerful tool to me. So I highly recommend all these books. I went really fast and I apologize if I was going too fast for everyone. But I really appreciate all of the books that I read, and I hope you get some books for your to be read pile. So thank you for hanging out with me today.
Thank you, Kathleen, so much. As you saw in the comments, everyone's on fire from what you shared, but also the way that you wove all of these narratives together with this larger thread of wandering and migration. Like all of your work, it just is so thoughtful. I really appreciate you, because like that open mic book I saw before, back when it first came out. I don't think I ever bought it for myself. Now I'm going to. So I appreciate that you mixed in new to me or new to us text too. So
Awesome.
thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I felt like this was speed dating. We were like on this
Yes.
really fast date. And thank you
Yeah.
so much for hanging out.
It was the most wonderful date that I think many of us have ever been on. It felt very good and warm. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
And a reminder to all of you watching, if you were inspired by this session or any session today, please do pay the joy forward. The Gathering has always been a totally free K-12 literacy conference. You do not pay for registration. You don't pay to fly to some location, to go to a convention center. You don't book a hotel. You're not paying for lunch and coffee during the day outside of the convention center city. Please do consider what you may have spent, even if it is just for a cup of coffee, and consider paying the joy forward. If you go to gathering.theedclub.com/charity, there you can find more information about today's 2 adopted charities, which were selected by our opening keynote. And we encourage you to donate there, or donate to another charity of your choice, or find other ways to pay the joy forward. I think also equally important is what Kathleen reminded us about, how important it is to hear stories, both ones that mirror us and enlighten us, but also to hear the stories of others and then engage with them. I really appreciate, Kathleen, you talking about migrant communities, especially in the world that we're in currently, with the decisions that the US government is making about people who have immigrated to the US or immigrating through it. It's essential that we hear and learn more stories, even outside of our own experiences, and to stand up and fight for the rights of people to exist and to live their lives fully and joyfully. So thank you, Kathleen, for that. All right, everyone, coming up next is the closing town hall. I will have some opening remarks, and then the Zoom will begin. If you have pre-registered, that Zoom link has either come to your email or it's about to in 2 minutes. We look forward to joining you there shortly. We'll give you about 10 minutes or so to enter the Zoom before the remarks open. So thanks all. Have a great closing to your gathering. Thank you again, Kathleen, and take care.